Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we'll start this Kiddushin daf Mem Zayin. We're going to begin on the very bottom of Mem Vav Mem Beis, the second to last words, last line. Omer Rabbi. So Rabbi says, as we continue to Mem Zayin Amud Aleph, Lo Shanu. We only learn, says Rashi, in Mr. Refsel's Apruta. So at the very end of our Mishnah, the Mishnah said that if she was eating these dates, that as long as, the simple reading of the Mishnah, that each one of them, we could find out of any of them, rather, that they're worth a pruta, then it's a Kiddushin. They're not mitzvah. Now, it does mention that it depends in the Reisha and the Seif, the first two parts of the Mishnah, actually. If he said hiskadshi, so that separates the languages, and therefore it has to be a Kiddushin only if it's shava pruta, each one, or one of them is a shava pruta. However, if he said bazu, 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 then it combines. So again, says Rava, lo shanu el di armula bazu, bazu, bazu. The only time we say that if she's eating them over and over, that's not mistar to a pruta, is only if he said bazu, bazu, bazu. This one, this one, this one. But if you would say with these, that combines everything. Even in that situation, it would be a Kiddushin, says Rashi. So it wasn't enough that one of them is a pruta. But as we saw, the problem is that the first one is comparable to a milva, to a loan, as we discussed in yesterday's daf. And therefore, as Rashi says, it has to be in the sina achreina. It has to be the very last one. It has to be worth a pruta. That's only in the case where it was said bazu, bazu, bazu. But if he said elu, says Rashi, mikabel sarishayna lo ba'asal yada b'taras milva. The first ones actually did not come as a loan. Why? Dimishmigamar hadibor, when he finished his words, hikna lo b'taras Kiddushin. Basically, he was interested in all of these dates being connected to Kiddushin. And therefore, the first ones are also not a milva. So if he said be'elu, therefore the chiddush would be that it would be a Kiddushin, says Rashi, im yesh b'kulon shavar pruta. Befil achor rishayin b'kedeshes, im yesh b'kulon shavar pruta. Okay. So that's the chiluk. The fact that she was eating them, she was like for herself and they were hers. So now we have a support to Rabba. Hiskachli ba'aloin bariman be'egois. A person says, I want to be mekadeshu with these different types of foods. Aloin, Rashi says, a meichel chazir, chazir yar. So it's maybe not the greatest of foods, but nonetheless, people also eat them, and they roast them in fire. Okay. Rimon, of course, a pomegranate. Egos is a nut. Oh, sha'amel hiskachli be'elu. Or he says, with these. We're going to focus on elu. So if among all of them combined, it's a shavapruta, then that's good. That's because he said be'elu, and then it says bazu, bazu, bazu. So obviously we clearly see, like Rabbi, there's a chil between saying bazu, bazu, bazu and be'elu. Im yesh b'kulon shavapruta mekadeshes. If all of them combined, it's a shavapruta mekadeshes. Im love ein mekadeshes. Now this is interesting because it sounds like the same lashon as above. Im yesh b'kulon. Here it says b'kulam, b'kulon. Still, it's the same thing. So the question is, why doesn't he just couple them all together? It sounds like actually there's not a chiluk between bazu and elu. So bazu not so we'll have to understand why then it's written that way. So it doesn't seem like there's a difference. Bazu, if he said this, not so she immediately eats it. Bazu, and then after he's doing this, not bazu. Every time he gives her one, he says bazu, and she eats it immediately. So one of them has to be a Shever Pruta. So this is interesting. When she eats them, and they're not around every time when he says Bezu, so it has to be that you at least have to find one that's a Shever Pruta. They're not Mitzvah. So now we have to understand this case. What is this case of these foods? You said I want to be conscious with either this one or this one or this one. That can't be, because then clearly they would not combine. How could we say imish bekulon shever prutim kadeshas for oikaimer? If you said, oh, you're separating them. So obviously it's not mitzdarf. So it can't be that he said, oh, because if he said this or this or this, then that certainly they wouldn't combine. So that can't be the case. You said it in this language. So hainu b'zu b'zu b'zu. That sounds very similar to zu zun zu, right? So instead of saying this, and this, you're saying this and this and this. You're saying aloin rimon egos. You're just explaining what these things are, but it's the same thing. They should have the same din, and therefore it's hard to understand why we mention this case, the first case of aloin rimon egos, and then you say b'zu b'zu b'zu. It's the same thing. So why does it say it twice? Elolav. So that must be that it's a separate case too. Can't be the same thing. Elolav the armula be'elu. It must be you said elu. No, that can't be, because how many times seifma oshi armula hiskachli be'elu mechad dereishul be'elu askinan. There has to be that it's not elu, because if you said these, then it already said that. The very beginning it says hiskachli be'aloin v'rimun egos o shi armula hiskachli be'elu. So obviously the case of aloin rimun egos cannot be elu, right? So where it says not necessarily prush kamafarish. It's possible that one's just explaining the other, as we find many times in Shas. And this is what it means. Hiskachli ba'alon b'rimun be'egois ketzad. What is that talking about? So when you say elu, so that already combines them all, because you're saying with these. With these combines. And therefore, as long as all of them together is a pruta, it'll be Kiddushin. Now, B'katani Seifa. So let's go slow. That's the first part. Let's say that's the first case. B'katani Seifa, B'zu natlasava chlasai. So, not that they were all there, but she kept eating them every time. That's talking that it has to have at least one of them has to be shever pruta. They're not mitzdarf because she's eating them. Now, the iluresha in the first part, it doesn't make any difference between if she's eating them or not. Whenever you say elu, ki ka'achla menafshe ka'achla shma. In other words, if you look at this case, there's three different situations. You have the case of alon rimoin egos, which we're saying is the case of elu. So once you say elu, even though she's eating them, it's still mitzdarf. However, the other case where he said b'zu b'zu b'zu, because he didn't say be'elu, he said b'zu b'zu b'zu, even though b'zu 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 would combine, that's only if they're still here. But if she's eating them, then it would not. So this is the difference. If you say elu, it doesn't matter even if she's eating them. She ate them or didn't eat them, the din still is that it's mistaref. Everything's combined. However, if you said b'zu b'zu b'zu, they're not mistaref if she's eating them. If she's not eating them, they are mistaref. So again, that explains the sheet of Rava. Let's go back to the beginning of Rava. Lo shanu, the only time we say that they're not mitzdaref is only, he said, b'zu b'zu b'zu. But if he said be'elu, even if she's eating them, they're still mitzdaref. Okay. So that's the raya. Okay, we got that. Hanichel madiyomer a seifa koi. That's only good if you say it's the seifa. Umay ad shehei ba'achs mehem shever pruta. Again, this is going back on yesterday's daf. You have to remember. You actually have to remember yesterday's daf. That when we said in our Mishnah is three cases. Okay, so let's remind ourselves. The Mishnah said, the first case, you said, marry me tomorrow's zoo. Marry me with this date. So he said, and you kept saying hiskachli b'zu. Since he said Kiddushin, each one separately, so therefore each one is on its own. However, the middle case, which is what we're calling the Seifa, is Bazu Bazu Bazu. So the Bazu Bazu Bazu, it says, no, they combine. But then it says afterwards, but if she's eating them, Ache Ba'achas or Ba'achreina Shevapruta, they don't combine. So that makes sense, because that third case, if you will, of our Mishnah on Mem Vav, talking about her eating them, is connecting itself back to Bazu Bazu Bazu, this middle case, if you will, which again the Gemara calls the Seifa. And therefore, because of that, we're making a distinction when it comes to Bazu 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 between her eating them and not eating them. So that makes sense. So we're explaining, based on the Mishnah, as we saw before, that if the Mishnah is going on the Seifa, right, the case of Ochelas, then this fits very nicely. Right, that's what we said over there, because since she's eating them, if she wasn't eating them, it's Kiddushin as long as they're all Mastar, because he said Bazu Bazu Bazu. But if she was eating them, then it's only the last one, because the first ones are considered like a milva. Hachinami yad sheibachron and shevaprut. You can say the same thing here. Elo Rabbi Shmuel Dimer Tavayu. A reisha koi, that really it's going on the reisha. That what? Again, what was the reisha? Where we said that they're all separate. Well, that case of eating, they're also all separate. The chiddush was vayichelos etzrichalei. The whole chiddush was that you would maybe think that since she's eating them and she's getting hana by eating them, that maybe even pachas m'shever pruta, she's still miskadeshes kamash malan. That even though she's eating them, it doesn't work. Here, the klal is being mentioned. In other words, cases that are inclusive of all, prati lo kachashiv. It's not mentioning things which are exclusive. So Hamani Rabbi the Amr Loshna Kazais Loshna Kazais Prata Havi. He says no, it doesn't make any difference. That even if you say Kazais Kizais or Kazais Ukazais, the din is the same. It's considered to be a prat. In other words, if you look in Rashi, it says Bahach Seifa Dekatani Bazu. When you say Bazu, Natlas Veichalto, Ba'oid Bazu. Tana Chrinahu. This is actually a totally different Tana. The Lav Hainu Tana Dereisha Umetziasa. This is not the same as the Tana, the first and the middle case. It's merely Karebi, he holds like Rebbe. But Tana Oicheles V'hu Adin Lo Menachas V'oicheles. Doesn't make any difference if he's eating. V'oicheles Mistrichale Rashmin Dafgad Mekarba Hanyasa. Even though she's getting Hana, she's not Mekadosh Pachas M'Shever Ruta. And so therefore V'hachik Katani Bazu Trey Zimni Gabi Natalta V'chalta V'od Bazu V'tani Im Yesh Ba'achs Mehem Shavar Pruta M'Kadeshus Mishum Desfile Hiskachi Akoy Chada Kol Chada Koi Hiskachi Bazu V'od Bazu Hiskachi V'hachta Rebbe. Fine. So again, basically he's saying that if you say with a vav or without a vav, either way it's still a prat. In other words, they're still separating. Even if you say this and this and this, so maybe the vav would combine them, it doesn't combine them. Okay. Omarav. HaMekanish b'milva in Mekdeshus. As we've said before, if you're Mekanish a woman with a loan, it just doesn't work. Because milva hoitzandis, no. Because the money is considered to be, it goes out. Says Rashi, obviously the whole purpose of the loan is that they can spend it. It doesn't have to be involved in some type of way that money is liquid, that he can get it whenever he wants. Says Rashi, so it's considered like it's hers and he never gave her anything. Okay, it's hard to exactly understand what that means, but again, this is the whole question that we're going to be going through now. Whether or not everyone holds, if you're Mekadosh Bil Milva, whether it's a good Kiddushin. So, Ne'emat Ketanoi, Mekadosh Bil Milva Mekadeshes, Yeshem Mekadeshes. So it's pretty clear that must be a machlokas, not everyone agrees to it. My love is a Nabahak Mivki. The Marsav Milva Hoitzan, and the Marsav Milva Lava Hoitzan. But Tizbra, if you want to tell me that's the basis of the machlokas, that does make sense. Amos Seifa. But Shavin, that they all agree, but Mecher, when it comes to a sale, Shizek Kana, says Rashi, Imachar lo karka, if you sold karka, Shenikna b'kesef, that was purchased with money, Im Amrule, if you say to him, Milva sheyesh le'elecha. I owe you money, by the way. This land is worth $100,000, and I own this land, and I want to sell you this land. But the truth is, I owe you $100,000. You know what? Take my land, and instead of the land, of you paying me for the land, let's just cancel out the loan. So the question is, does that work? So everyone says it works. Now, how could that possibly work? There's no money here. It's gone. It doesn't exist, right? It's like in the air. So how are we able to do a kinyan with kesef if milva is l'hoitzanisna? So Rav Nachman, Huna Chavrin, Huna, our friend Moikimla, he established a b'mili achori. Something else. What happened was the following, this case. He said, marry me with $100. V'nimsa mana chaser dinner. Turned out that it was $99, as we said before. So Mark Saver Kseifa Lamilsa Lamitve, she's going to be embarrassed to wish to claim it. And therefore, because she'll be embarrassed to claim this coin, says Rashi, so it's not a good Kiddushin because he didn't give that amount. Omar Saver looks Milsa Lamitve. No, she's not going to be embarrassed to ask for it. So therefore, that's really the whole group, the machlok. It's nothing to do with milva. The Eloha de Omer Rebbe Lezer Eskashu b'manav v'nasan dinner harzim kadeshes v'yashlim. But we see a case that says that if you say I'm mekadesh with 100 and he gives her only one coin, $1, let's say, it's a good kedushin, so let's pay it back. So so maybe it's the same thing. So no, there's a difference between you owing me $1 and you owing me 99. So Amri Madachasar Dinner Ksefal Milsal Mitve. It's possible that if you have $100 and you just didn't pay me back one nickel, so I'm going to be like, forget it, I'm not going to pay you back. Now you have to pay me back. I'm embarrassed to ask you for it, but the problem is that was totally on the Kiddushin being Chal. However, Madachasar Tisha Vitashal Ksefal Milsal Mitve. If you only pay me $1, you still owe me 99. I'm still going to collect from it. So that's a huge, obvious chiluk. Okay, stop there for 1 second. Let's look at question 7. Machalo karka, I want to be able to sell my land to you, but I also owe you money, so you'll take my land, and the money that I owe you, just like you gave to me, right? Im kana, does it work? If the loan is here, if it's not here. So it says like this. If the money is here, it's going to be totally, it's not so clear that this is mamish what the Gemara says in Maskana, but this is how Dirshu understands it. So this is how I'm going to understand it. That when the money is extant, when it's here, then it's going to be totally if you say milvel hoitzandis or not. But if the money is not here, then lo kana, according to all opinions, it will not work it will definitely not work at all. Okay. Let's look at question TB 15 while we're talking about questions. Mana chaser dinner. She's missing 1 penny, $1, let's call it. Timikdash is madua. So it's actually machlokas. Iksifa milsal mitve ve'enim kadashas o deloy ksifa la umukadashas. Okay. Beferish. TB 15. Very clear, clean, simple question. So let's just get this down. TB 15. Okay. So it's all totally on Nimsa mana chaser dinner, marsak v'seifel milsal mitve, marsaver luksibel milsal mitve. Okay. Weiter. So that's what the case is over there. So Meisvei, the more ask a question. Ha'imril isha. You say to a woman, hiskachli b'pikadain shieshli biyadech. So be mekadosh me with a pikadain that is in your hands, right? I gave you some a beautiful ring, mashal, to watch. And now, once you be mekadosh me with it, and you're holding on to it. The halcha, she went. Turns out it was stolen or lost. So if the guy left a pruta, okay, maybe a ring's not the best. He gave she gave a sack of money, right? And it was a pruta left, so it's kedushin. So in that situation, says Rashi, Mukadeshus bahi hana de mochel gabo. Oh, okay, let's slow down. So in that situation, again, that's the din. As long as there's a pruta left, then it's a good Kiddushin. And then it says, that's my Bikadon. Interestingly enough, and this is Rashi, that the fact he was moichel the loan, so that's already, even if it was completely lost, it doesn't make a difference, it's still Kiddushin. He says the name of Rabbi Meir as we continue to test Mem Zayin Amid Beis. Milveh, when it comes to the case of him lending her money, Harihi Kipikadain. It has the exact same din as a Bikadain, and Rashi reminds us what that means. Tim Nishtair in, Ilo Nishtair lo. It has to have, she has to still have a pruda by her. So the machlokis by a milva, even if there's nothing left, or even if there, just as long as there's a pruta left. Now, one says even if it's not a pruta, it's still a good Kiddushin. The other one says it has to have at least a shever pruta. Although the kuli alma we see everyone holds it's a good Kiddushin by a loan. The whole question is if there's nothing left or a little bit left. So Amalei Rava Batizma, does that make sense? Mitaratstahi. Do you think this is actually a good brisa? You think this makes sense? Mishabashtahi. This is actually broken. Hai pikadon hechidami. What is this case where he left her pikadon? If she accepted upon herself responsibility that if it gets lost or stolen, that she has to pay it back. So hainu milva. That's the same thing as a loan. So why would we say there will be a chil between a pikadon and a milva? It must be that they're separate, because that's what we're saying according to this first shita. Either lo kabbalah achrayas, but one second. If let's say she did not accept responsibility, yihachi had a tiny seifa. Why do we mention the case of a seifa? Of a milva, alpha bishul nishtar him and a shever pruta mekadeshes. Why do we talk about pikadon, then we talk about a totally separate case of a milva? It makes more sense to be niflug v'nisnei b'didah, that we should actually make a distinction in the case itself of a pikadon. If the pikadon itself has qualifications, that there's sometimes the dinim are different, so then instead of talking about a milva, you should talk continuously about a pikadon and distinguish within a pikadon. And say, b'medavar amurim shul kibul achrayis. Of a kibul achrayis, if she accepted responsibility, so the fact that it doesn't do that, obviously it shows that there's something wrong in this whole statement, and therefore we have to restructure it or understand it better. Milva, this is how you have to read it. When it comes to a loan, no, actually because a makadosh b'milva is the end of Kiddushin, and therefore even if there is a shever pruta, it's not a good Kiddushin. That's the only way you can understand it. He's lenient. He says a milva, you could be mekadosh as long as there's money there. So therefore we see the machlokus whether or not mekadosh b'milva, whether it's mekadeshes. So b'may kamifiki. So what exactly is this machlokus between them? The Rabbi Meir's leaning over here. Rabbi says, Ashkachtinhu l'Rabbanan b'Beirav. They found the Rabbanan in the Beirav. The Yasi, they were sitting in Kamri, and they said like this: B'milva b'rshus balim l'chazara b'hu hadin l'oinsin kamiflagi. Actually, it's a different machlokus. The question is, when it comes to a loan, which is in the reshus of the Baal, for it to be returned, as well as oinsin when it comes to accidents that took place. That is the machlokus. What does that mean? So the Gemara explains it this. Damar savar milva b'rshus loive kaima. We say that when there's a loan, and you lend, the malva lends the loiva, let's say $1,000, it's considered to be reshus loiva. It's now considered to be in the domain of the borrower. V'hu adin l'oinsin. And therefore, so too when it comes to any oinus that takes place, namely that it's in the loiva's domain, therefore he has to be responsible for it. Marsavar milva versus balam kaima, which is interesting. He holds that the milva, the loan, is considered to be in the hands of the baal. The hadin, the oinsin, so too when it comes to oinus. So, all of the money, in this case, is still by her. She didn't touch any of it. So if you hold Rishus Baalim, that's like considered still the husband's, and he can take it back, so he can be Mekadesher with it. But if she spent any of it, everyone will hold it's not good, right? So this is the whole point. We're going to see that in the Seifa. But the point is that if she's holding on to it, and she didn't do anything with it, so then it's considered like Rishus Baalim. No. When it comes to an oinus, everyone's got to believe that it's in the Rishus of the Loiva. So it's the Loiva's responsibility to make sure he takes care of it. My timer, lo gar mishe'ela, can't be any worse than borrowing, because when it comes to among the Arba Shomrim, so the most lenient one is the person who one of the chiyuvim is she'ela, if you borrow something, right? So if you borrow something, you're at least chayiv b'oinsin. If an accident, something which is something happens to it, you're still chayiv, right? So over here, why would we say it's any different? So therefore, she should, that the loiva would be chayiv. So zama she'ela the hadre be'ena. Just like when you borrow it, you return it exactly the way it is. Chayiv b'oinsin. So milvul koshikain. So loan. So when you lend money, also where you actually used it, so certainly should be chayiv, no less than a malva. So therefore, than a shoyel. So therefore, certainly, we should say that legabi oinsin is considered to be rishus haloiva. El hacha milva. So really the whole machokas is, again, if the loan, is it considered like the loan is in the Rishus of the Baal? We find a case, if you borrow an axe, right, for 10 days from your friend, and you're chopping with it, so once you're doing a maisa with it, you've actually started using it, so therefore it's like you're kind of it, and therefore you're going to be chayiv, lo bikabo lo ikana. But if you didn't do anything with it, then you're not. You didn't do anything, right? So it's just sitting there. Salema katanai amol shmaise. Well, again, this is a machokas tanaim, because again, as we said before, so let's say she's holding on to it. Let me say it again. All the money's still by her. She didn't touch any of it. If you hold that it's rishus baalim, and he can take it back, and he can be mekadosh with it. But if she spent any of it, everyone should hold it's not a good. It shouldn't be good. But over here, right, that's what you should hold. But we don't see that. So lo adkan lo playing ela b'milva the lo hadr be'ena. When it comes to a loan, we know it's not being returned as is. Ava b'she'elo, when you return an axe, the hadr be'ena, where you're returning exactly the same way. The only time you're kind is actually if you do something with it, because you're returning the exact same thing. So if you're returning the same thing, so in that situation, you're only going to be kind when you actually use it. However, on some level, to be obligated or anything. However, when it comes to this case, which is the case of a loan, so they say even if you didn't use it, the din is you're still responsible for it. Okay, let's look at question 8. Hashoyel kardam mechaver v'obikabo b'rishus mihavi l'chazar l'oinsin. So when he didn't use it, l'chazara harihi k'rishus mashal. So it's considered to be in the rishus of the mashal. L'oinsim harihi k'rishus hashoyel. So it's considered to be the borrower is still responsible for anything that happens to it, because there's a shoyel, even if he didn't use it. However, as far as it being returned, it's considered to be rishus mashal, because if he didn't use it, he wasn't kind it for those 10 days, and therefore he can always get it back. Again, that's only in a situation when we're talking about something that is returned as is. However, when it comes to a milva, we do not say that din. Okay, let's look at question TA 14. Ha'im she'ela u milva b'rishus baalam u'einsim l'chazar or b'rishus baalam v'halava. So this is a similar question, but it's a little bit harder because it's asking for both. So TA 14, this is the correct answer. So l'inyan oinsin, we said it doesn't make any difference. There's no difference. It's always considered to be rishus hashayel, rishus haloiva, We don't make any distinctions. So it's when it comes to an oinus, the loiva is chayiv. When it comes to chazara, when it's for him to be able to get it back, when it comes to borrowing it, it's considered to be the rishus baal. Kolzman shaloi bika boys, provided again he didn't use it. That's a l'divir kol. However, halva, that as we said is a machlokas tanoim. All right. So lemaka tanoi. So again, we're going to try to find nemaka tanoi, whether or not mekadesh milva is mekadeshas. Hiskachel b'shtar chayiv. Marry me with this shtar chayiv. There's this document of monies owed. It was a loan in the hands of someone else. The hirshalehem, and it was inherited. Okay. So, and says Rashi, Kasav Harshalehem, there's a document upon this. So we have a machlokas. So perhaps this is what we're going to establish it as regarding a loan. So what is this loan? If we're talking about the other people owe hainu milva bi'ad, that case was already mentioned. It means that she owes him the money. And this is good for the machlokas, whether you can be mekadesh with a loan. So maybe we see this machlokas. No, we're only talking about a shtar chayiv of others. So 1 second, if it's a shtar chayiv of we already mentioned that. Here, even though we are talking about loans of people someone else owes you, but one was a written document and one is a milval peh. One is an oral document. But milval shtar b'may pligi. So 1 second. If we're talking about again this document, so what's the machlokas? But put to the Rabbi rabbinic miflagi, it's telling this other machlokas. The sanya. Oisiyais niknos b'masira divri Rabbi. What does this mean? If I have a shtar that says I am owed $1,000, I could sell it to someone else, and I don't need to write a shtar for this transaction. So if I have a shtar, again, I owe that says that I'm owed $1,000, I can just give you that shtar. You give me, and that's it. And I don't need another shtar to back it up. Just the oisios, the letters alone works. Says Rashi, Eno sarach lichtav shtar machira al hashtar shumoicho. I don't need another shtar for this shtar. Ela mishamasalo shtar. Once I give you this shtar, sheishu al acher uzachis bo neschayev halaylo parim lozeh. Now you have to pay. So it's almost like money on some level, right? That you're transferring ownership, and you don't need another shtar to verify. You have to do both. You need to write another shtar. Okay. Says Rashi, we're talking about a situation where the man wrote to her shtar chov, and he didn't write a shtar mechira when he did this. So Marsam Kadeshas Islay the Rabbi. Okay. So Mar Islay the Rabbi, Mar Leslay the Rabbi. So that's the whole machlokas. The whole machlokas is talking about a situation where he gave her this, where we're dealing with this shtar that he gave her, and he didn't write another shtar to back it up. Whether that's considered to be a kinyan, and that was the whole machlokas when it comes to, again, milva bi'adacherim of a milva b'shtar, that he gave her the shtar. It wasn't a loan that she owed. It was a loan that someone else owed, and therefore now she has rights to be able to collect this money. But the question is, did it work? Because he didn't give her a shtar to back up this transaction. Maybe no one holds like Rabbi Hacha, but a Rav Papa committee. Maybe the machlokas is something totally different. Do you remember Rav Papa? Haiman, the zavin shtar l'chavri, a person sold a shtar to his friend. So you need to write Kenilach hu v'chol shibude, that you're being kainit and all the liens that it acquires. So Mar Islay the Rav Papa, Mar Leslay the Rav Papa. Again, it's possible that again you missed this detail, and therefore it may not work, and that's what the malchokas is. V'boy sema the koyam Islay the Rav Papa. You need to have this written, or else it's not good. V'hacha b'deshmul k'minfri Tiamer Shmuel, as we continue to Mem Chesam and Aleph. If you sell a shtar chov to your friend, the chazer, and then you retract to machol moichel. This is an unbelievable thing. So I have a shtar that you owe me $1,000, So now I sell this star to someone else, and then I say, you know what, you don't have to pay me back the $1,000. That actually works. It's hard to even fathom that works. It says Rashi, the bar doesn't have to pay this guy anything at all. El machmas hamoicher, only because of the seller. V'hari machlo etzel Rameir leisa de Shmuel. Hilka samcha daita v'loy chashinin dilma ozol machale. She's not afraid that he's gonna be moichel alone. Roman Isra de Shmuel Hilka chol samcha daita the samra ozol machale. So that's the case. Let's go back in the Gemara. Hamoicher shtarchel v'chaver b'chazor moichel machal v'fil yorish moichel. Tomar Isra de Shmuel mar salvar tomar leisa de Shmuel. So the question is, if you actually hold like this, so she's going to maybe be concerned that he's going to be moichel alone, and she'll not be getting anything. And therefore, because of that, maybe that's why it's not a Kiddushin. Everyone holds that the man could be moichel alone. So how could be samech das? Here we're talking about the woman herself. The woman is pretty confident in this guy. He's not going to leave me alone and do something else for someone else. We're married now. Why would he forgive a loan and I'm not going to get something? My wife, he's not going to give it to me so he can forgive someone else. She doesn't know. Maybe he will be Michael. But milva, so that's the case of milva b'shtar. Milva al-peh b'may. So again, many possible scenarios of what the machlokes can be, but not necessarily milva mekadosh b'milva. B'milva al-peh b'may plegi. But Rav Huna and Rav Yom Rav Huna and Rav manli b'yadich tinu leploni b'mamad shloshten kana mar savar kikam. Okay, so there's a din of mamad shloshten, the famous din of mamad shloshten, Shibud Rav Nosson. Rav Nosson's name is not mentioned here. So I say, I have $100, so give it to someone else. As long as the three of you are together, that works. So instead of A paying B and B paying C, you can pay directly and cut the middleman. So Mar Savar Kikam Rav, when does he say this can be done? Hanabim Pikadain. That can only be done when it comes to a Pikadain. You can't do that by a loan. Mar Savar Shna Milvalo Shna Pikadain. You can even do it when it comes to a loan. That also would work. Okay. See if there's another question over here. Question 9, no. TA 15, no. TB 16, Adkan.